Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cardiff Central podcast. My name's Dan. We're back with another of our summer episode of special guests. But firstly, I'm joined this week by Harley in the co-host chair. Harley, how are you?
Yeah, all good. I was just in off here, bit sore, but that serves me right for trying to play this stupid sport that the ball doesn't make sense.
All good. And then third special guest of the summer is a man who he started out with the Scarlets, but he made amends for that by switching across to Cardiff later in his career. Member of the 200 Club. He's former club captain and recently retired, moving on to coaching the academy and the Rags this season. Josh Turnbull, how are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks. Good to be here. Good to get on the podcast with you guys.
Good stuff. So take you back to the start then, back to the very early days. Where did it all start for you rugby wise, and what was your path to the Scarlets first team from there?
Started rugby castle with Emlyn, down in Newcastle Emlyn, as a junior. I played in a sevens tournament for my primary school and got picked up, and they said, "Oh, why don't you come and play for Emlyn?" And I did. And then I played all my junior rugby down there. And then as I was getting through like under 12s, 13s, 14s, started to get picked up by like Carmarthenshire West District. And I guess it just, then it was carried on schools under 15s, do a shield. And then from there, just kind of kicked on really. Played in a Crauchete's game against Cardiff schools for their centenary year, and then got picked for Wales 16s on the back of that. And then from there, I had a real good summer. I was actually working on a building site with a couple of people I know, just labouring, moving blocks about, just doing a bit of pocket money. And we had a notification that I had a trial for Scarlets 18s and went there. It was probably one of the best games of rugby I've ever played. Where it was a 3-day trial. It was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the game was on the Sunday. And it was when they used to do the 18s and 19s. And I know a few of the boys who were 18s eligible trialed up for the 19s. Lou, Ken, and I went in the 18s, and I had a real good game. And then from there, like the Scarlet Academy got on the phone and they said they had a week's trial. They had a week camp up in North Wales, and if I'd like to go on trial with them, and I did. And I wasn't very big at the time. I was probably about 95 kilos. Not much of me. But the one thing I could do is run. And I already had a Welsh Vest athletics by this point. 400 hurdles, javelin. So it was a bit of a pentathlon, decathlon, so multi-eventer. And then I went and run. We had a 3K test, and I run sub 10 minutes, and they were like, blew all the boys out of the water, and it was like, right, you got something, you got a good engine, we can build on that. We can basically build on your frame in the gym. Wasn't the most skillful player, but what I did was I just worked really hard at it, and I had from then about 2005 onwards, I was involved with the Scarlets then through their academy system up until 2007 when I made my debut for the Scarlets. And then in there, Wales 18s, Wales 19s, 2 years of 19s, 1 year 20s. And then by that point, I'd already played. By the time I went to the 20s World Cup in 2008, I'd played maybe 10, 12 games for the Scarlets by then. And then from there, spent another 7 years there then and saw the bright city lights and joined Cardiff.
Just looking at the under 20s squad that you played with 2007-8, and there's some pretty good names in there, lads who've gone on to make good careers, and lads who you're coaching alongside now. I see Scott Andrews in there as well.
Yeah.
That was quite a good group to come through with. Obviously Sam Warburton, Justin Tipprick, likes of them.
Yeah, I think I think there's 4 Lions out of that group. And that was my second year 19s, and my first year 20s was that group, and there was some real unbelievable players in there. I think my first year 19s, there was a number of internationals in there as well, like Ken Owens, with through Lou Reed, Brad Davis, a number of guys who maybe didn't quite make it. Lewis Evans, Sam Kiley, Dan Franks, the Lewis twins, Reece Priestson, Reece Jones, Martin Thomas, John Davis, Gareth Moore. So that team was a pretty good team as well, and we got to a semi-final World Cup that year as well. So there's some pretty good players across those 3 years at 19s and 20s that I played in, that all went on to play international rugby. And in that last year 20s, you look at the players you had. You've got who made it as an internationals. Scott Andrews was there. I don't think any of the other front rowers did. Tips, Warby, myself, Reece Webb, Dan Bigger, John Davis, Gareth Owen, Lee Halfpenny, Dan Evans. He was in an international camp, but I don't know if he ever got capped. So there's some quality players in that group.
Yeah, absolutely. You sort of brushed onto it at the end of your first answer, but so moving to Cardiff in 2014, how did that move sort of come about? Was it something you were actively looking for, or was it just an opportunity that presented itself?
I'd had so 2 years prior to that, I'd had a conversation with Di then, but nothing really materialised. And I'd also spoken to a couple of clubs in England when I met them, but at the time, I still had ambitions to play for Wales, so I carried on. And then 2 years later, Phil, who actually signed me at the Scarlets and gave my pro debut at the Scarlets, was at Cardiff at the time, and he said, "Oh, look, a couple of boys are moving on at the end of the year. I think Patterson was moving off to Northampton. Copeland was going back to Munster, and they were looking for a 6'8". I went and met them, and it felt like the right move at the time. I'd been at the Scarlets for 7, well, if you include the time in the academy, nearly, close over 10 years really. So, I felt like it was time for a fresh start, a new challenge, and probably put myself out of the comfort zone of I guess when you've been somewhere for so long, you get comfortable, and I didn't want to be, I wanted to challenge myself basically. I know it's not outside of Wales, but it was, going to a different environment within Wales and seeing what I could do there really. And, I don't regret any of it really.
Said there about going to a different environment. Obviously, it was summer 2014 when you come up to Cardiff. The club has changed a lot, it's fair to say, in the last 10 years. What sort of the biggest changes that you've seen, like off the pitch in particular, that are in that time frame?
Look, I think when I first joined Cardiff, quite fortunate, we had the base of the Vale, and it's a good selling point. It was a fantastic facility. I think over the years that's probably been missed, having that base that you can call home as a training facility that's just solely yours. Look, we've tried, been to the Arms Park, we've been at Pentwyn. That long-term plan, or whether it's going to be the Arms Park forever. Now, you need to have that. That was a real good selling point for players coming to the Vale, because it was in a real nice place, nice facility. And that's probably one thing. I think the past couple of years has been frustrating as a player when you're bobbing about different places. You're like nomads really, but and that can be frustrating at times, because ultimately the boys, you either start at the Arms Park and you end up at Pentwyn, or you start at Pentwyn and end up back at the Arms Park. I guess the number of coaches that have been there as well. That's a frustration, because by the time you feel like you're starting to do something well, someone else coming in through the door and they start to imprint something, and then there's a change then. And hopefully now with Jockey in charge, there's going to be some consistency there, and they can just back him now, and he can do a good job with the coaches he's got there.
On the pitch, though, it's been it's been up and down, but there's been plenty of high points throughout that 10-year spell. What are some of the standout memories for you in a Cardiff jersey?
Oh, I think there's a lot, but I think when we played, I always say it, Power at home in the semi-final of the Challenge Cup is my favourite game in a Cardiff jersey. I think, because we'd been written off. We'd been written off before we went to play Edinburgh a couple of weeks before that, and we beat them. And then we made wholesale changes and played the Ospreys in the stadium and nearly beat them. And then playing Power at home, packed out Arms Park. You couldn't ask for a better day for it. Boiling hot, star-studded Power team, massive scrum, massive maul, and we played Cardiff rugby and chucked the ball about and turned them over. And I actually enjoyed that game more than the final because the final just went so quick and it's all a bit of a blur really. I just remember being 14 points down, thinking, "Oh my God, what's going to happen now?" But some brilliance along the way from a couple of young'uns, and we got that W in the end.
We had Garen Smith on as our last guest, and we was talking to him about his kicking it through at the end before the turnover. When you see him going for that kick, what's your thoughts from where you
are? Look, it's like with Hodgie in terms of like work he put in around all the players at the breakdown, making sure that we were able to get the ball back some way. And I think for the number of years that he was there as the D coach, we were in the top 3 for number of turnovers. Winning turnovers of the contact area, and it's basically what we built our team around was, could we get turnover? Could we transition into attack and play that open, expansive game of rugby against an organised defence? And that's the best time to attack is once you've got a turnover, because it's ultimately the defence is disorganised and you've got probably maybe 2-3 phases maximum to rip them one. And that's what we built our game on when Jockey was first there, Hodge was there, and I guess we probably had the personnel to do it as well. Albeit probably moving around a little bit, playing in the second row myself personally, but it allowed us to have 2 sevens on the field and Nick Williams at 8 then.
Yeah, so it was a hell of a sound, but left it. I think actually Cardiff has usually have been the top 1 or top 2 for the last 5 seasons in a row now as well for turnovers. It's such a thing of us. So we've got a question in from friend of the pod, Andrew Ford. He wants to know, who's the toughest player you've ever played against or trained with?
Trained with on the field, in terms of like the physicality, and is George Earl. Just a tough, hard man, typical South African second row, massive arms. Never saw him doing arms in the gym either. So he was just proper brute in those mauls, scrums. That's what he lived for, contact area. In terms of toughest I've ever played against, probably someone like Backy's both of Victor Matfield, when those two together in 2014 when played against South Africa. Well, they had a pretty strong team then anyway. So, Dwayne Vermeulen at 8, Willem Alberts at 7, and Frans Lowe or Schaltberger at 6. So, in terms of a back 5 or scrum, I don't think it's much scarier than that.
Sort of just moving on to your onto Wales, because obviously you've not had the sort of conventional Wales career, because you sort of come in and out at the times. Was that frustrating to be to be there or thereabouts, or was it a case of you always knew?
Yeah, it was frustrating at times because I know 2016 I was top of my game, stats were through the roof, and I tried to justify. I missed out on selection. I went in on meeting, and I just tried to justify it by saying, "Look, here's all the stats from the Opta. I'm top of them in carries, turnovers, tackles, meters carried for forward in Wales," and it was just and the reason I got was it's just a matter of opinion, and selection was a matter of opinion, and that was it. So, but ultimately, I think little things drive you on. You just want to keep plugging away, and I think 2021 against Argentina, Canada, I'd probably had a number of seasons where I'd been on form at Cardiff. I noticed throughout that COVID period and then coming out the other side of it, picking up 9 man of the matches in one season or something like that, and then getting a reward at the end of it, and it kind of probably that felt like that reward felt justified because of all the performances I'd put in, and then. I remember going in 2009 on the first summer tour with Wales to North America, Canada. I was a young pup, literally played 20s the year before, a handful of games for the Scarlets by this point, and got picked to go on that tour to North America, Canada while the Lions was on. And I think there was 6 boys went uncapped, and I was the only one to come back uncapped. And then it took me another 12, 18 months to actually finally get that cap done against Scotland in the Six Nations in 2011. So, and again, it was just a period of just plugging away, keeping my performances high for the Scarlets at the time. And I guess, when you're playing or you're trying to get into a squad, when I first started dropping there, where it was Andy Powell, Martin Williams, Jonathan Thomas, Ryan Jones, Robin Sauter-Taylor, Sam Warburton, Toby Faletau, Justin Tipperick coming through then. Most of them are Lions as well. So, it just shows how competitive an area the back row is in Wales, and hopefully it will continue to be like that, because that's what drives the best out of people, and all players, and they want to get the best out of themselves to be in that environment.
You said about like presenting all the stats and stuff, and I can imagine somebody like Morgan Morris at the moment doing something quite similar from the Ospreys, ringing up the Wales coaching staff, like I'm player of the year about 8 years in a row or whatever. Is it something that you use to sort of like chip on your shoulder, or do you just let it get you angry to drive on? What sort of advice would you give to someone in that position?
It does. It can. It depends how you take it, really. Like, I've always been quite chill. Like, I've found times like that frustrating, but the only thing you can do is then just get back out on there, get back on the horse as quickly as possible, and become the fittest player, become the most skillful player, become the most physical player in your position. So, there's always certain things that international coaches are going to be looking at, and a lot of that will come down to work rate off the ball. And if you, and if you listen to the South Africans, they talk about how many positive impacts you can have in that period of time that you're on the field. So, it's when you get that opportunity, you just got to make sure you grab it then. But I'm grateful for all the opportunities that I've had in that Welsh jersey. I've played 13 times or 16 times, 3 non-test matches, 13 tests. I'm quite comfortable where I'm at with it. And a whole stack of regional rugby, so I can't complain, really.
You mentioned obviously plenty of games across your career. We've had a question from Tony on Twitter who says, what are some of your favourite fixtures? So I guess sort of like any ones that you circle when the start of the season comes out, and also your favourite venues that you've played at across the league and Europe.
Definitely when I was at Cardiff, definitely the Scarlets games. Always look for them when they were for an MOM, and then try and get a big performance in. And they're usually around Christmas, early this season or Christmas time. You might get one at the end of the season, so pencil, always circle them ones. And then, Leinster's always a good place to play at, just decent crowd, always tough to play against as well. I said on a podcast the other day, I when we first started going to South Africa, it was good. It was a different experience. Not sure if the novelty's worn off a little bit, just because of when players go out there now towards the end of the season in May, I think it can be quite frustrating as well. I know a number of players who've come that time of the season, they're like, oh, fuck, I've got to go and do South Africa now. But I get, whenever you play European games, French, you always look out who you've got in Europe. You always want a good European trip. I remember being at Scarlets, we played Clermont 4 times in 2 years, home and away. Good trips to Toulouse. It's like they've got such big support in terms of, like, when you turn up on the bus, they're literally like, there's a tunnel of fans there just whooping at you, and you like having experienced that in Toulon, Toulouse, Montpellier, Brive. There's some, big rugby teams in France who love that, and it's just a good occasion. So yeah, any of the French teams really, and Welsh derbies.
Every year I wait for Claremont. I don't know when the last time Cardiff played Claremont was, but it's certainly I don't think we've played them while you were at the club, certainly, and I
No, we haven't.
remember.
We haven't. We played Lyon quite a few times. Played Toulouse, God knows how many times in Europe since
Every
I've been
year.
there. Yeah,
To Pau a couple of times as well, haven't we? I've seen
Pow's pretty good. I remember the one year we went out there. It was called off on the Saturday because it waterlogged.
Yeah, I was there. I was in a bar in Pau because it took a nightmare to get out there because the French were on strike as usual. So we'd have to change the flights. And then, we found out from the taxi driver whilst trying to get to the ground that it wasn't happening anymore.
I remember Harlequins was quite a good game. The M4, it's a good game. Bath, Bristol, good games to play in. You get good crowds to them. And I even said on the podcast I was on the other day that it'd be good to see an Anglo-Welsh league. I just think, the number of games that Cardiff have played in the last couple of seasons, Sale, Bath, Harlequins, sold out the Arms Park, shows an interest there. Granted, it's in Europe, but just think about that. If that was the league as well, you'd have Bristol, Bath, Gloucester, all pretty close to the border. Pretty good games, I think, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We got another question in from Mike, who obviously you were captain for a good couple of years at Cardiff. I don't know how many years was it that you were officially club captain? Do you know?
So I did it a year without being officially captain, and I did it for 3 then. So 4 unofficially, 3 officially.
Yeah, so he asks what the best part of being captain is, and just give us an impression, sort of what is the sort of weekly role to the captain. Obviously, we see it on the pitch with the leadership and discussing the referee, but what's the sort of day-to-day captaincy role?
All right, you lean a lot on other leaders in your environment. So while I was there, we had a pretty strong leadership group that you could lean on, and in terms of like delegating or orchestrating what you wanted to get across, so it's not just your voice all the time. You allow other leaders, so like sub group leaders or line out leaders, backs, 9s, 10s, your orchestrators, basically to talk more about attack and defense, or your defense leadership group. Let them leaders talk about those areas of the game, and then ultimately you just at the end of the week you're crossing the T's, dotting the I's in terms of you get a feel for how the week has gone, whether you need to do a team run or you need to do a walkthrough. You have boys come and speak to you how they're feeling. Is there things we can change in the week? Food's good, food's not so good, and then you just feed it back basically to whoever's like to the S&C coach or to the other coaches, your head coach. And it's not it's just trying to manage that the group as best we can, so we get the best performances on the Saturday then, because ultimately that's the one day of the week, whether it's the Friday night or the Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, we need to get right. You need to get all your prep done in the week. And again, it's just helping some of those younger players out as well, put an arm around them. I remember when I was a youngster coming through, it can be quite frustrating at times because you can either be just holding tackle bags or traveling reserve, and it can be frustrating because ultimately all you want to be doing is playing, and you just got to be patient and wait for that opportunity. And then as a professional, you make sure you get your recovery done and you keep on top of things in house really that give you and your group the best preparation for that week then. And then game day is just give the boys a bit of a rev up, cover off the key points from the week. That's what I always try to do, is make sure by the time we got to Friday, Saturday, the key points were in my message before the game. So if we were going to be going contestable kicks, it was picking out the wingers saying, look, if we're going contestable kicks, we've got to make it 50-50. We want to be making that. So I'd be calling the wingers out saying, look, you've got to be getting up for that ball, making it as hard as possible for them to get it. if we're going for, backing our kick chase, our back row is going to lead that. So calling them out and saying, look, if we're going to contest the ball, boys, you guys need to be doing that job there. Whether we talked about whether we were going to set the tone as a forward pack, you'd give those forwards a couple of points in terms of like, look, boys, we talked about mauling this way. We're going to do it that. We're going to do that. We're going to get on top early doors, and we just try and paint the picture in their mind as how we want to play the game. And that's one thing I learned probably in picking up taking the bits of information and how to paint that as a picture into the boys then. So then they've got it clear in their mind as how we want to play the game.
Do you think that sort of your role as a captain, a lot of what you described is sort of how I'd imagine what a coach is like. Do you think that sort of helped you with your progression, your transition into coaching?
Yeah, definitely. I think like coaches try and paint that picture as well of how you're going to do things on the field. So they try and say, look, we want to play like this in a certain way. And that's, again, where you get there's some really good clips on YouTube of players doing it. There's one of Quade Cooper, he's saying, look, we're going to run this strike play off this scrum. You're going to run this line. He's going to run this line. And then we're going to put him through the hole. So already, you're not really worrying about what the opposition are going to do. You're just worrying about everyone running their right lines. And ultimately, you can make a bust off that. And you're getting everyone's attention. You're painting the picture for them. And the coaches do that. I've tried to take that experience into my coaching and just try and help the youngsters I'm coaching now, or the Rags, or as previously it was Quins, and help them by painting those pictures to those boys. It definitely helps, yeah.
So we'll move into coaching a bit more properly, but obviously now this is your first pre-season basically of not being a player. What's it like? What's it like being on the coach's side of it? Is it a bit of a relief, or are you one of the weirdos who actually likes pre-season? Or
yeah, I do, because I love keeping fit. So I've been doing a lot of cycling, a lot of running and swimming recently. I'm training for an Ironman, so I wasn't. Basically, I'd spoken to a couple of my mates who've retired and become coaches. And one of them ended up going up to 135, 136 kilos. I won't say who it was, but he said, sign up to do something and put something in the diary so you train towards it and you get a bit of a routine then. You don't just become lazy looking at the laptop all the time. So a number of my mates outside of rugby they'd signed up to do it. They said, why don't you do it? So I ended up signing up to it. So I'm actually, again, a little bit edgy because I want to, when I see the boys training, I still think I've got it. So but no, I'm missing the contact. My body feels really good. Actually, I've lost 4, 5, 6 kilos since I've retired, and that's purely because I don't have to do the gym as much. Still go to the gym maybe once a week to keep myself ticking over and maintain some sort of strength. Eating as much. I don't have to eat as much. I don't have to maintain I don't have to be 116 kilos to play rugby anymore. I can just be healthy and live a healthy lifestyle, basically. So that's that. But I wouldn't say I'm missing any of the contact or anything like that. Body feels good, so I'm happy.
When I'm sat down in the evening and I'm watching double episodes of Love Island and I'm going on Instagram and Josh Turnbull's banging out 15-mile runs, I'm borderline unfollowing at that point. But it's impressive stuff.
It's a different type of training as well, because like you train rugby, you train to be fast, you train to be probably cover 7-8K in a game at high speed. Where like now I've got to learn to run a marathon at 10 minute miles. So it's completely different training. It's quite a selfish sport as well. It's not something I'm going to carry on doing after I've done the one. I might carry on the bike, but every Saturday afternoon, every now and then go out on a bike ride. But it's, in terms of like the hours you've got to dedicate to put into it, it is quite it's up there.
Said about the body feeling better there. You said on the Sport in Wales podcast the other week, and Carwyn can send me the invoice for the plug there in the post. But you said about the sort of the surgeries and injuries you've gone through in your last year of your career.
Yeah,
you've you've always obviously been a player that's been right there in the contact, putting your body on the line. Was there sort of consideration of retiring at any point before you actually did? And, just how sore was the body in those last couple of years?
After lockdown, after the 5 month lockdown, like amazing. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was like, I had a new lease of life. I went back there fitter than I'd ever been before. I was leaner than I'd ever been before. I was, and it probably coincided with me have a real good spell of good rugby afterwards then. Because I genuinely just really looked after myself. I was going 5K runs every other day. I was like, I was enjoying. I had a gym in the garage. I went back strong. And everyone started to like, oh, he's 31 or 32 now, 30, 33 maybe, maybe 33. Yeah, and it was like, oh, he's getting on a bit. And I just had this run of real good games, real good performance, and I was on the back of this, real good 5-6 month break. So, and then I don't know. I had this. I think it was last year, the beginning of the year. I had a knock on the side of my knee. Not last year, the season before. I didn't feel anything all the way through the year, and then I stopped for the off season, and it just kind of seized up, and I came back, and I just couldn't shake it off, and I managed to get through the season the season before, relatively okay, but it like at the end of the season, it was giving me some trouble on the side of my knee, and basically went for a number of scans, and there was a calcification that had occurred from like a fracture on the side of my knee on the fibula head, and basically gone all arthritic. So there was a number of choices. They went in there. They could go in there, try and shave it off, but because the compound nerve runs right down the side of it, if they caught that, you end up basically your foot becomes disabled. So you can write off running or cycling or doing any sort of activity then, and your foot would stop working. So that was a no-no, and they was like, right, we'll just crack on. And all these things were going through my mind at the end of that season, end of last season, beginning of this season then. And it was like, well, what do we do? Went saw a knee specialist, and he said, well, there's an operation you can have. It's quite a speculative one. Basically, they go in there and they disconnect your fib, so they take about an inch of your fib out. So it now looks like that there's a gap in the middle of it. At the time, probably didn't really. I was struggling to run, struggling to twist and turn, change direction. So it was like the recovery period was 10 to 12 weeks. Ended up being something like 24 because either from the compression of the swelling, they compressed the nerve, so there was a little bit of damage to the nerve that run to the big toe. So I couldn't use my big toe for a good few weeks, and then it was like a scene out of Kill Bill. I was just lying on the sofa. I was like, "Come on, move my big toe, like literally, and just trying to get that little tendon to flicker up, and it did. But and then it took a number of weeks once we got running properly to get back on the field, and probably because I hadn't done the pre-season, I was probably playing catch up a little bit, so I never probably felt as fresh as I wanted to throughout this last season just gone. And then ultimately, I was always chasing two milestones, either hit 200 for Cardiff and chasing that John Muldoon record of 254, which I think I was ended up being like 9 off or something like that. So it's a record I don't think will get beaten, because I don't think people play in one league long enough now or play the game long enough. So it would have been nice to get that. But, to hit 200 for Cardiff and not be a Cardiff boy then, or come from the region then, to hit 200 games was massive. And I guess after I played that 200th game, I guess kind of felt like I'd achieved what I wanted to achieve, and the decision was made a little bit easier then.
Yeah, because I sort of remember we were discussing on the pod after that last game, and you talked to I think Lauren Jenkins about it, and talking, and we were all sort of under the impression, I think he's all but retired. He's all but retired here, but obviously had to wait for the announcement. But yeah,
I guess like after the game, I didn't really think about what I'd actually said to Lauren until after that. I think I've just announced my own retirement here, but we played someone the following week. We played Glasgow away the following week. I know we had a week off, I think, after that game because it was that break and play kind of stuff. And I'd had a bump on the actual knee that game against in the first 2-3 minutes against Leinster. And I was like, "Fuck, I'm not coming off here. I'm not coming off here after 3 minutes. I can't on 200th game. I'm not coming off." So I dug in, and then the next week it was pretty sore. We had a bit of downtime. The following week they then played Glasgow, and I'd had a bit of time. I trained on the Tuesday, and on the Wednesday I woke up and I felt like I played a game of rugby. I felt like all I did was scrum, maul, and I was like, geez, I am getting old now. I'm feeling this every time we do a maul session. I'm feeling it. I'm like, this must be telling me something. But not many people know this. But it was meant to be the Connacht game. It was going to be the 200th. But we'd done a big session on the Friday. On the Sunday, I ended up in hospital with infected ear. A cut on my ear got infected, and all my ear got inflamed. I had to go on an IV drip. So then there was the risk of cardioenteritis. So I wasn't allowed to play that Connacht game. I literally managed in training that week. I wasn't allowed to do anything. The following week, then we started to pick things up slowly. I had to do like a return to play. They didn't want me to have a heart attack basically because of having an infection. And then it was the following week after that was Leinster because we were playing every 2 weeks then. And so he literally was like, look, walk through Monday, do a little bit Tuesday, team on Thursday, play on the Friday, whatever it was, or play on the Saturday. It was literally just tick the boxes to get to this game so I wouldn't get injured or anything like that. And then go on 2 weeks was when I said to Jockey, oh look, it was on a Thursday, I think, can we have a catch up? And then actually Richie Pugh rang me on the Friday, Wales 18's head coach, and said, oh, are you available to come away April, the 18 Six Nations? I was like, look, let me speak to Jockey. We've got Munster next week, which I don't think I'm going to be involved in anyway. And the week after that is a week off. So spoke to Jockey on a Saturday. He gave me the all clear, and it kind of said, look, any international age grade team come and ask you to coach them, you go and do it because it's part of your transition now and it's what you want to go into. And spent a couple of days with the academy then. And then on the Monday, Tuesday, and on the Tuesday was when I told Jockey that I was going to retire. And he was like, oh, look, you've done everything you need to do, and go and enjoy coaching now.
I think that sort of transition is nicely now into the thing. It's said thank you for giving us that little exclusive about the infected ear. Weirdly, the morbid part of me kind of wants to see pictures, but let's.
Oh no, it's like I look like the bloke off the Goonies. Hey, you guys! It was like my neck was all up, my ear was all inflamed. It was like they tried to lance it, but thinking I had a cauliflower ear, but it wasn't a cauliflower ear. It was just a literally the infection and the swelling had made it go so big, and then they stitched it all back together, and it was just I had this redness coming down my neck, and it got to my collarbone. And I went back to the hospital on the Wednesday to have the stitches out, and they were like, "Oh no, you're coming in. You're going on IV now, basically."
If anybody listening is good at Photoshop and wants to put Josh's face on the thing from the Goonies, then feel free to do that and send it to us.
Anyway, sort of moving on to coaching. So just sort of broadly before we go do some a bit more in depth. What's your general philosophy as a coach? Are you a bit more of a barky order, or do you gently talk through people through? And who are the coaches to as you were growing up, whether it was rugby or other sports, who sort of helped shape you?
I think a lot of the coaches I've worked with have helped shape me as a coach, taking a little bit of something from everyone. I've always been, what people don't know is I've actually been coaching since I was 22, 23 years old. I did Scarlets 18s for 4 years, from 2010 to 2014 before I left, and then coached Blues 18s and for a number of years when I first joined Cardiff, and then my home club Newcastle Lebanon for 2 years, and then more recently Commander Quins the last 4. So when you add it all up, this number of years I've been coaching and worked through my badges while I've been doing that, and that's the one thing I guess. Am I barker? Not only when I need to be. Generally, I try and get my message across with visuals and demonstrations and orchestrating other boys to do it, and like to use different ways, really different methods to get that message across. And it's something that I'm probably still learning about, and it's something I'm quite passionate about as well.
So one of the questions we've had from Steve Coombs, another friend of the pod, he's wondering. Obviously, you've played. You're quite a versatile player. I brought, I think, stat we used for our Christmas quiz is that in one of the previous seasons you wore the most different jerseys of any other player in the well, actually, out of any of the Welsh regions and in the URC in general. Do you think having that, being that utility player, helps with your coaching, being able to coach through different roles?
Yeah, I guess if you're talking about some of the little intricate details of each player, then how teams see a 4 and a 5, how teams use a 6, 7, and an 8 these days. If you look back when I started at the Scarlets, I was an open side that played 8, that covered 8. Then I moved to blind side and covered 8, or played 6, 7, and 8. That's probably one of the reasons why I ended up leaving the Scarlets, because I played in all 3, but never really had a set position. And then later on, playing 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. But ultimately, I think the game of rugby, if you take away the scrums and it's just numbers on jerseys, then because you've all got to be able to catch, pass, tackle, clean contact areas. Apart from kicking, which all backs do these days, you might find the odd Seb Davis launching up with his left peg 50-22. But generally, you need, as a rugby player, you need to have all the skills that everyone else has. So I think in terms of what you're talking about is those intricate details, how a second row binds with a prop and little things like that. What little cheat lines back rowers can do to get to the contact area. All of those little things that I've had to learn across my career. And I guess that, if you stand still as a player, you probably don't achieve half what some of the best players do achieve. So I've had to learn, I've had to change the way I played the game, add different strings to my bow. It's, I guess now it's for me to coach those players. I'm not going to go and coach props how to suck eggs, because I'm not going to be able to, I'm not going to be able to coach them out of the intricate details of being front rowers. What I can tell them is that they need to be hard, tough guys to get in there, basically, and to front up a little bit. But the rest of it around the park is quite easy then.
What you said about the back rowers there is interesting. We had a question from Paul Williams of Twitter and Rugby World magazine fame, who says, do you think the role of a specialist number 8 has been replaced by a sort of hybrid back row players now? And it leads into something we were talking about on our pod last week, discussing Morgan Morse with the 20s and whether he's a 7 or an 8. And actually, does it really matter? Is there much difference now in open play between these positions?
Well, I think if you look, it's a good question, to be honest, because you look at Exeter, they traditionally don't play with a traditional 6, 7, or 8. They play with 2 big back rowers who are tall for a line out, because that's where you get most of your possession from, is line out or kick return. So do you need to have out and out jacklers on the field? They're comparing us to Cardiff, say 2018, when we won that Challenge Cup, back row, second rows, compared to what Exeter would have. Exeter had a 4, 5, 6, and 7 who were, granted 6 and 7 probably a little bit lighter than their locks, but tall, athletic men for the line out purposes. And the number 8, Sam Simmons, who was quite athletic but small, quite punchy. Saracens with Ben Earl now, he's quite small, quite punchy. What Whereas we went the other way. We had 2 sevens and a big number 8 who wasn't a line-up forward, and probably in myself and Seb or George, not the tallest of locks, but probably guys mobile, get around the park. But where you compromise yourself there is you kick long and on keep the how you play your game. Then your game tactics come into it. But we're not going to kick the ball off. We're not going to give them line outs because we haven't got the line out personnel. What we're going to do, we're going to kick long and on, let them run it back. We'll get turnover. We'll play transition rugby then, where Exeter were quite happy to kick the ball off the park, try and steal it in the air, line out, or they'll use their defence and they'll win a penalty then, and then they'll kick a corner, use their line out. So it's each team is different, and I think like how you know, in terms of how you pick your back row now is depending on how you want to play the game. I guess if you want to have, you know, some teams now picking a 7 and an 8 who are quite similar, and a 6 who's like a second row. England were doing it with Courtney Laws, weren't they? They're doing it with Chandler Cunningham South now. He's big, you know, cross between a second row and a 6. I think ultimately Wales won that type of player in terms of that, someone who can play 6-4. I think Chris Ginger's has had a pretty good tour. I think he could probably do it. Same with whether he's heavy enough to play 4, I don't know. But what's his name? Scarlet back row, Plumtree. He's very more of a 6. But you know, having that athlete gives you that. Having a back row who can jump in the line out, as long as you've got 3 genuine jumping options, gives you more variety, more options to get the ball back or win the ball cleaner. So I guess it fits on how you want to play the game. So it's not, you know, everyone tries. I wouldn't say anyone's trying to copy anyone at the moment. It's just, you know, France do it different. They have a absolute massive 5, doesn't jump, but they just use them to lift and build them all around. So, you know, and that's how they've gone about it. Then they have a rangy 6 and 7, and a big 8. You know, there's not many 8s like Greg Aldrich around who's just a big ball carrying, who's gets across the gain line every time he carries the ball.
That's interesting stuff, that. And just circling back round then towards the end of the pod now, focusing on Rags and Academy. Steve asks, obviously the Rags going into this new Super Rugby Cymru. You've been around the Welsh Prem for a couple of years now with Carmarthen. Do you think that we'll see some improvements with this new league, a sort of a step up in quality, or is it going to take a couple of years really to bed in?
I think, this is my personal opinion, I think it's going to take a couple of years for it to bed in. I think ultimately the direction is the right direction, because when I played Prem, there were teams had a spine, say 5, 6, 7 players who were there all the time, and the rest of them were supplemented by, you know, you think about when I was coming through at Llanelli RFC, you know, you had the boys who had opportunities was Ken, Rob McCusker, myself, Dom Day, Lou Reed, Rhys Priestson, Foxy, Dan Evans, all had opportunities. But those players who were in and around them, Rhys Williams was another centre who had opportunities there. They had like a core of Prem players. I think ultimately it's going to take a couple of years, because at the moment, if you're training with the seniors, or you're a senior academy player, you're more likely to end up being a travelling reserve. So you miss out on that rugby. I need to get to a point where once these 16, 17, 18-year-olds start to come through, they need to start, once they get to 18, 19, they need to start playing the highest standard of rugby they can, which for them is going to be Super Rugby Cymru. So it aligns with your academy then. Those boys are going to get good rugby. They can work on their fundamentals in that area, in that competition. And ultimately, if it's the next competition below the regional level, then you're one step away, basically. At the moment, I think there was too many old heads probably chasing cash in the Welsh Prem, or the old Welsh Prem then, which ultimately stopped younger players playing and developing. Or granted, also there's the financial side of the game at the top end has had a knock-on effect to it, because ultimately, if you haven't got the squad size, the next people you're picking is those senior academy players to come and train with you or become travelling reserves. So you think about some players who probably, they ultimately, if you want them to progress, they need to be playing as much rugby as they can, especially front row players as well. So I guess it's going to take a couple of years. This is my opinion. It's going to take a couple of years before you start to see, there's a really good crop of under 18s coming through now. In the next couple of years, it'd be nice to start to see them transition into that Super Rugby Cymru, and you're seeing more youngsters playing in that competition than you would have previously.
Yeah. So sort of moving on to that. So you're obviously leaning heavily on the development. With the rags, is that going to be your primary focus, is the development side of things, or is there going to be an emphasis? So this question that comes from Jonathan on Twitter, and then
it's not something we discussed, to be honest. But I guess you want to give as many of those for me now, as many of those academy players an opportunity to go and showcase themselves in that competition and develop them. It's going to be a tool for development, and ultimately we want to coach these players how to win games of rugby. So if the performance is well enough, the byproduct of that is going to be winning games of rugby, then, isn't it? So you're killing two birds with one stone.
So one of the bits of debate we've sort of had on the pod with other people I've spoken to with the Super Rugby, everyone gets a knockout game at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Do you think that's an important thing, is so that all these players get some experience of knockout rugby, even if it is just from the bottom end?
Yeah.
Or do you think it would benefit more if it was a more limited playoff system?
I'm trying to work out how they do the system now. I think it's 1 to 4 play against each other, 5 to 8 play against each other, or something like that. So it's like
I think it's first versus 8th, or something like that. Or it's first versus and then 12th or something like that. It's really weird.
So you could end up top of the table at one point, and you lose to 12th on a one-off game. Well, all that work in the season, it's so you've got to make sure you're on top of your game. I do think it's valuable for these youngsters to play knockout rugby, because you need to have that feel for it. You need to feel that jeopardy of not winning games of rugby. Ultimately, you don't want to get to a senior career and have not played any knockout rugby and not have that feeling of there's a lot riding on this game. So I think it's going to be good competition. It's going to take a period of time for it to bed in, but I think it's going to be worth it in the end.
Mark on Twitter asks if the Rags are looking to play a similar style of rugby to the first team, and I think that probably feeds into a question as well around how much link up there is between you guys as academy coaches and the first team coaches. Who got Cornel van Zyl coming in this summer as a forwards focused coach yourself. Will there be plenty of communication between the two of you about what you're looking for?
Yeah, I have a number of conversations with Cornel already around the line-out stuff. The fundamentals, how he wants to build, similar ideas in terms of that maul. I think is a big part of the game, and how you want it to function really, and how you get a maul to function. Because ultimately, if you can get a maul, teams have got to defend it. If they can't defend that, then it opens up things like breakout plays and strikes, because the opposition are wary then of the maul threat. So obviously that's something that's going to be big on the high up on the agenda then. And in terms of the way with Fishy in charge, you're going to see open rugby with the Rags. So he wants to play fast. He wants to play open rugby. He wants to move teams around. Actually, watching the boys the last few weeks in terms of the amount of fitness that they put in and the amount of skill work they've been doing, it's really impressive for what is a semi-professional team. And hopefully we take that into the season then.
I know we had Mike and Steve, and I think a relatively popular question then to finish off the rugby stuff a bit is which academy and Rags players are we to look out for this season, and who are you excited to coach?
In terms of the academy, 2 players I'll name now is Sonny McCabe, second row, and Tom Howe, hooker. Transitioned from back row last year. He played Wales 18s, but He's going to be. They're both going to be exceptional talents. In terms of the Rags, who to look out for in the Rags, depending if we get to see any of Steph Manuel and Tom Bowen, those two, having coached them both at 18s last year. Steph did 18s and 20s in 1 year. Not many people do that. He's had an excellent season of rugby. Hopefully he'll get some rugby with the Rags if he's not playing for the senior team. There's two backs there. Who else? It'll be a couple of years. I think it'll be a year or so before you see Sonny and Tom play Rags rugby. But they'll be heavily involved in the Rag 18s this year. I'm trying to think who else is coming through.
The back row wise, we saw Evan Rees a little bit at the back end of last season, stepping up to the Rags. What do you make of him?
Yeah, big, hard, physical back row from the Valleys. Naturally quite big as well. So he's got that on his side, and he's just got a bit of a hard edge as well. So hopefully he can kick on. He can get a good run of rugby, and I think I'm not sure if he's still eligible for 20s as well next season. So there's another one who could surprise a few people, just naturally how big he is, how physical he is. He took to playing Prem rugby last year like a duck to water, so he's one. I'm just like Sean Davis, a scrum half. He's away with Grant Taft tour in South Africa at the minute. He's one similar to Mike Phillips, really. Quite physical 9. Makes some lovely line breaks, reads the game pretty well. And he'll probably get an opportunity at some point throughout the year as well.
Good stuff, Harley. Anything more from you other than your a weekly question?
We'll get on to that. So this is another bit from Andrew Ford's question that I missed first. So if you could play with any player from any era, who would you most like to have played with?
Played with Scott Quinnell.
Good shout.
Only because he was like, pardon?
I could see that being part of a fantastic background.
Yeah, I don't know. He was coming to the end of his career when I was coming through, and he was always had time for all the youngsters. So he would have been someone, and I just loved the way he played the game as well. So he'd have been someone I would have loved to have played with.
And then our perennial end of question, which is for regular listener Liam. What's your favourite biscuit?
Biscuit. I don't eat much biscuits, to be honest, but chocolate digestive, simple. Dunk it in the coffee and done that.
Good shout. Well, Josh, thank you very much for your time this evening. It's great to hear your thoughts on your career and insight into the coaching, and best of luck with the Rags in the academy this season.
Thanks, guys. Good to speak to you.
Cheers, Harley, as well. And we'll be back in over the next few weeks with some more guests, so keep an eye on the socials for that. But until then, thanks for listening.
Right.